Are you thinking about getting a Big Muff and you're not sure which Big Muff is the right Big Muff for you? Well, we're going to be putting the Triangle Big Muff through its paces today, right here on GearGasms. Hi kids, welcome to GearGasms. I'm your host Alan Barnes, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Electro Harmonix, however you say it. The Triangle Big Muff is back. It came back from the late 60s, and speaking of the late 60s, before I forget, I've got the Jimi Hendrix t-shirt on. He was the original fuzz box king. Now you might think Jimi Hendrix would have a Big Muff just from the shape of his afro, but actually he used the Dallas Arbiter fuzz face. He came out with that in the 60s and blew everybody's mind. Well, they were hard to get. The people that made those couldn't keep up with the demand. Along comes a guy, a stinky hippie from New York City named Mike Matthews. I'll put his picture up right there. And let me tell you something, kids. He was a genius designer from New York City. He founded the company. He decided to make his very first Big Muff. Now, the Big Muff came out in 1968. It was a response to the fact that they just couldn't make enough fuzz faces to satisfy all the guitar players who were clamoring for the magical device that Jimi Hendrix played through. Now called the Triangle Big Muff just because of the layout of the knobs in a sort of a triangle there. The box back then was much bigger. I'm glad this little guy is a little bit smaller. Big Muffs were in, not just on the floor of pedal boards, but they were everywhere. They were below people's pants. In the late 60s and the early 70s, these great big gnarly run-amok muffs. The Big Muff remained popular after its release in 1968 all the way through the 70s. I'll never forget the year 1968. I was just getting out of college. These huge muffs were all the rage in the late 60s into the early 70s. It wasn't until the 80s that people got more into clean tones, clean sounds, clean bodies. It was like nobody owned any scissors for like 13 years and people were suddenly sick of it. How many pubic hair jokes am I going to make in one episode of GearGasms? It's up to you to count them. They're like Easter eggs. Turn it into a drinking game. Leave them in the comments just how many disgusting references to hirsute, men and women. Hirsute. There's a word you don't hear every day. Could that be the correct word to describe the Big Muff? Oh, those mucho grande Big Muffs. They were everywhere in the late 60s and the early 70s. Freedom was in. Women were burning their bras. It was hideous. People just went au natural. Late 60s, early 70s, the hippie smell has a very, very distinct odor. Once you get that up into your nose hairs, you can't get rid of it. It stays with you forever. The Mod Squad was on TV. People were sporting great big gnarly freedom-loving afros. The hippies had run amok. Nobody knew what a bar of soap was. Nobody knew what a pair of scissors was. They just let everything hang out. They let things get gnarly, funky, musty, stinky. We're going to run the Big Muff through a clean channel. We're going to run the Big Muff through a dirty channel. I'm going to use my trusty Stratocaster. This guy has vintage noiseless pickups. I wanted the pickups to not be hot for this. You kind of need something that's a little bit cleaner, a little bit weaker going into it to really make them sing. I know I can't wait to see what this Big Muff's going to do, so let's jump right into the tests. Okay kids, we're going to give you the clean tone first. I've got the trusty Strat. We're plugged into the Blackstar HT5 on the clean channel, and it sounds something like this. I've got the sustain at noon, I've got the tone at noon, I've got the volume down to about 9, 10 o'clock. Now I've got the middle pickup and we're going to do a classic early 70s fuzz tone riff. Let's goose a couple of settings and see what we get. I'm gonna leave the volume where it is, but I'm gonna crank the fuzz up a little bit. Right away when we max it, can you hear a little more noise? That's not super great. Might have to use this with a noise gate, but you can tell it's ready to be, the beast is ready to be unleashed. Now let's try a little bit of lead through it and see what we get. Now you can see why the distortion knob is called sustain on this thing. Back then, this thing blew people's minds because you get these violin-like swells and sustain, especially if you take the tone way off. Let's do that. I'm going to turn the tone all the way down on the guitar. I've got the middle pickup on. Turn the tone all the way up, leave everything else the same, go to the rhythm pickup on the Strat, see what we get. Alright kids, we're going to take the tone back to noon, and this time the sustain knob is all the way down. We're going to go back to the middle pickup. I kind of like the middle pickup with this toy. It feels kind of good. Let's goose the volume. So we're going into the clean channel. I just cranked it from 9 to 12, and you'll hear a big difference. Let's crank the volume up again. 12 to 3. All the freaking way up. Pull the volume back. Got the sustain at noon. These free-flowing tones, Big Muffs, experimentation was everywhere. You got guitar tones that you just literally had to dig your fingers through to find the sweet spot, but it was all good. And perhaps the smelliest, stinkiest hippie of all was this guy right here, who just finally passed away. May he burn in hell, or at least until the Tarantino movie comes out next summer. Chucky had a Big Muff. All of his girls had Big Muffs. I once dated a girl who had a Big Muff, and let me tell you kids, she didn't even play the guitar. It was crazy. Let's talk about the controls of the Big Muff here. I don't know if you can see this, kids, but it has 3 knobs shaped in a triangle, hence the name Triangle Big Muff. It's a super simple package. There's not a lot of fancy graphics. I like that. It's true to the original. Standard input, output. It's got a 9-volt input on the top. 3 simple knobs. You have volume, you have tone, and you have sustain. Each one of those knobs does something completely different than you might expect, and the 3 of those things working together give this thing a lot of variety of tones. Before I forget, let me give a big shout out to Robert Jackson of Robert's Guitar Dungeon. He's a much bigger channel than mine, yet he's been nice to me. He's given me lots of good tips, lots of encouragement. He does lots of cool gear reviews on his channel, so please check him out. Once again, that's Robert at Robert's Guitar Dungeon. Well, kids, we had a lot of fun putting this thing through its paces today. A lot of surprises along the way. The knobs, even though there's only 3 of them, they do a heck of a lot more for shaping the tone and changing the character of this effect. Most effects pedals, the volume knob only makes the effect louder or softer, but this guy really interacts with the front end input of your amp and can drive it even more. The entire throw of the tone control is in play. Many tone controls are only useful maybe say between 9 and 3 on the dial, but this guy in conjunction with this guy, there are so many different changes you can make, so many different flavors. The sustain knob, of course, is the thing that adds the fuzz. They call it sustain, I don't know why, but that actually has less effect than you would think throughout the range. It's really these two working in conjunction with the third one that make this thing really kick, scream, and do a whole bunch of different things. It's no one-trick pony. If you like this video, hit the like and subscribe button. Follow us on Facebook at GearGasms. Follow us on Instagram as GearGasms. Follow us on Twitter as GearGasms. We're always going to have new content for you. As always, thank you for your time, and we'll see you again right here on GearGasms.